All right, let's jump right in. We're looking at the 24 hours that literally erased an empire. Picture this, a perfectly ordinary morning, 66 million years ago. You've got a lush, humid forest, golden sunlight filtering through the canopy, massive sauropods grazing in the distance, just a vibrant, thriving greenhouse Earth. But then suddenly, the sky cuts to black. A jagged shadow eclipses the sun.
Now, to really grasp the sheer scale of what goes down next, we kind of have to recognize the status quo. For over 160 million years, dinosaurs enjoyed absolute, unchallenged biological dominance. They were the undisputed apex of creation on this planet. No sudden plagues, no superior hunters, no gradual shifts in climate were threatening their peaceful reign. But, well, the universe doesn't exactly care about apex predators. This beautifully balanced world was about to be completely erased, not by biology, but by a sudden, brutal physics equation.
And that physics equation, it starts with 45,000. That is the jaw-dropping speed in miles per hour of a threat that just entered Earth's neighborhood. We're talking about a jagged, scarred asteroid, roughly the size of Mount Everest, 10 kilometers wide, hurtling through the black void of space directly toward the Yucatán Peninsula. And what you should really take away from this explainer is that this wasn't some slow decline for the dinosaurs. We are tracking the exact 24-hour timeline where their world just ended.
So let's zero in on minute zero, the exact moment of impact. You know, when a 10-kilometer-wide object slams into the Earth at 45,000 miles per hour, the normal rules of physical geology, they just stop applying. Actually, scratch that. They completely go out the window. The asteroid didn't just hit the ground. As it entered, it compressed the atmosphere in front of it so violently that the air itself ignited. We're talking about a blinding flash of white light, an absolute dead silence, and then the instantaneous vaporization of the shallow ocean floor into white-hot plasma.
When that absolute monster of a rock struck the shallow waters of the Gulf of Mexico, it released a staggering amount of kinetic energy. We're talking 10 billion. That's the equivalent of 10 billion Hiroshima bombs exploding at the exact same time. Try to wrap your head around that level of power. It's almost beyond human comprehension, but that is exactly what hit our planet.
This nightmare scenario is what we call a kinetic strike. Because the energy release was so intense, the Earth's bedrock didn't just crack or shatter, it literally behaved like a liquid. In a fraction of a single second, a crater 100 miles wide and 20 miles deep was punched straight into the Earth's crust. It's this terrifying physical reality where solid rock behaves exactly like water reacting to a dropped stone, displacing massive amounts of matter instantly.
And the devastation immediately radiated outward. That initial strike birthed a hypersonic shockwave. Picture a wall of compressed air moving way faster than the speed of sound, just blasting out in every direction. Anything within a 1,000-mile radius, massive forests, mountains, entire herds of triceratops, flattened, pulverized, instantly. But here is the craziest part. As devastating as that ground-level blast was, the true apocalypse was actually heading straight up into the sky.
The impact was so unbelievably violent that it blasted roughly 25 trillion tons of vaporized rock and water straight up into the dark vacuum of space. Think about that. A massive chunk of Earth's crust briefly went into orbit around our planet. But gravity always collects its debts. As this pulverized rock was pulled back down, it re-entered the atmosphere at orbital speeds. The friction caused trillions of these glass-like particles called tektites to superheat.
Which brings us to the terrifying reality of those first few hours, the global broiler oven. As those glowing tektites rained down like a biblical meteor shower, the entire sky turned this ominous glowing red. The ambient temperature of the global atmosphere spiked by hundreds of degrees. Needless to say, it was a spectacularly bad day to be a T-Rex. If you were standing anywhere on the surface of the Earth, the thermal radiation literally caused spontaneous global wildfires to erupt all around you in minutes. Anything not submerged deep underwater or burrowed deep underground was incinerated alive.
And hey, if the firestorm wasn't enough, the oceans unleashed their own kind of retaliation. As the global forest burned, the sheer displacement of water from the impact generated megatsunamis. We're talking waves towering up to 300 feet tall, radiating out from the Gulf of Mexico. Just imagine a colossal wall of water moving with unnatural speed, completely ravaging coastlines across the globe and dragging millions of tons of biological debris back into the deep ocean.
So, just tracking our timeline here, we've gone from minute 0, the kinetic impact, to hour 2, the terrifying global firestorm caused by those re-entering tektites. But as we zoom out from days to months, the final fatal blow arrives. The intense, searing heat of the first few hours starts to fade, and it's replaced by a lingering, freezing devastation. The planet was basically forced into this violent, extreme contrast. We go straight from the global broiler oven, hundreds of degrees of blistering heat, to a sudden 50-degree Fahrenheit plunge in global temperatures. The chaotic, burning surface of the Earth rapidly transitioned into a cold, grayscale wasteland, snow and ash just blanketing the charred remains of the forests. So how exactly did we get from a firestorm to a freezer?
Well, it comes down to a catastrophic chemical reaction. The asteroid just happened to strike a massive reserve of gypsum, which is a rock incredibly rich in sulfur. Vaporize that rock, mix the sulfur with global soot from all those burning forests, and bam, you get an impenetrable layer of aerosolized dust in the upper atmosphere. The sun was literally blotted out. The Earth went pitch black. Welcome to the nuclear winter. Without sunlight, the entire photosynthetic food chain collapsed overnight. Plants died, herbivores starved, and those massive apex predators were left in a barren wasteland with absolutely nothing to hunt.
And here's the grim irony about the ashes of this empire. The exact traits that made the dinosaurs so unbelievably successful for 160 million years, their massive size, their massive caloric needs, their highly specialized diets, those became their absolute death warrants in this new, dead world. I mean, a T-Rex or a Spinosaurus was simply way too big and way too hungry to survive in a wasteland. The stark reality over the following months and years was just brutal. 75% of all plant and animal species on Earth went completely extinct. Only 25% made it through. This was a biological great filter on a scale that's hard to even comprehend. It's a terrifying representation of just how much life was wiped out by a single cosmic dice roll.
So who actually made up that lucky 25%? Well, survival suddenly required a very specific resume. You needed a small physical size, burrowing capabilities to hide from the fire and the cold, and you had to be perfectly happy eating scavenged scraps and insects. Early mammals, these little guys no bigger than rodents, managed to scrape by on rotting vegetation. And alongside them survived the only lineage of dinosaurs to make it through the apocalypse, those small, adaptable, feathered avian dinosaurs. Yep, the direct ancestors of the birds sitting outside your window right now.
Think about that. 165 million years of complex evolution, pretty much erased in a single 24-hour window. The Chicxulub impact didn't just end an era, it completely reset the evolutionary game board. It created the ultimate biological power vacuum. And without the massive dinosaurs taking up every single ecosystem, those adaptable little mammals finally had their shot to spread out, evolve, and eventually inherit the Earth. Which brings us to our final and probably most important question. When we look back at how suddenly and violently the dinosaurs' reign ended, what exactly is humanity's great filter? Because the universe, as we've seen, doesn't play favorites with apex species, whether you're a giant reptile or a technologically advanced human. It's a stark reminder that every empire falls eventually, no matter how invincible it seems. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive into Earth's most dramatic day leaves you thinking a bit differently about our own vulnerabilities and our place in the cosmos. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.